Welcome to Cheshire Corners. I'm Sebastian Coco, and I'll be your host as we trip through the looking glass. Today we're introducing a new mini-series called Loving, Tripping, Feeling, where we'll talk all about forms of psychiatric care that involve any kind of psychedelic or psychoactive substances. Make sure to leave a comment if there's a specific practice that you think we should cover. This series will definitely focus on the clinical and more scientifically approved work, but pay attention. There's a lot of similarities between these therapies and traditional spiritual practices like shamanism. We're kicking off the series in Boulder, Colorado, where I met with Daniel Mcqueen at the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness to talk more about psychedelic therapy. Here's what he had to say. Daniel, can you describe to me what is psychoactive therapy in like a very broad sense?
Yes, so psychedelic therapy is a combination of therapeutic techniques with psychedelic medicine for the treatment of a clinical disorder or other human struggle. It also steps into potential growth areas of human potential. Psychedelic therapy is the use of psychedelic medicines in an intentional setting with a guide or other facilitator for the treatment of generally a mental health concern, primarily PTSD, but there are other treatments out there for depression, end-of life anxiety is a big one, and anxiety in general, and it's also used to support stepping into our fullest potential as human beings. So it's not just clinically oriented or pathology oriented. It's about stepping into who we are as human beings. It's not quite the same as psychotherapy with the use of a psychedelic medicine. Psychotherapy is part of it, but we at the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness really try to not limit our practices to traditional psychotherapy. So for us to be a psychedelic therapist or psychedelic guide requires the ability to and the mindset of a nurse and a nurse practitioner, someone who can support someone who's having a physiological response to the medicine. It's also important to have skills of a psychotherapist or a counselor. And we primarily work with somatic psychotherapies and Jungian and imaginal psychotherapies. So that would be an important component of what we would consider good psychedelic therapy. Another important aspect of psychedelic therapy is aesthetics and play, beauty, creating the right setting, right? I'm sure you've heard that term before. So what does the setting look like? How is it held? Is there an altar or a meditation space? And then last but not least, it's so important to include the transpersonal dimensions of this work. People are having religious experiences. People are having sacred spiritual experiences where they're communing with something that feels bigger than them. And so it's important for the guide to have skill sets similar to a minister or a spiritual counselor. So a good psychedelic therapist is someone who has clinical training, whether or not they have a degree in it, good skill sets in harm reduction and knows the research, and real specific things like dosing, so being something of a medical practitioner, an artist, and someone who can create an experience that's almost like a sacred theater experience, and then a person who can hold their hand as someone is going through a life-death rebirth process and meeting something beyond this space. So in some ways, psychedelic therapy is simple. Most of the time we're sitting there in silence and quiet contemplation and staying regulated ourselves, our nervous system staying regulated ourselves. But in other ways, it requires a lot of different skill sets that combine together to create a unique, individualized experience in response to how the medicine is taking effect.
Cool. Can you talk more about how you were trained, how you trained others? Because you talked about this whole skill set, basically. How do you obtain said skill set, and then you're officially licensed to work, basically?
My practice and path as a psychedelic guide is somewhat unique in that I've had the opportunity originally to work with someone in an underground setting as an apprentice, and so I got to see that side of the work, more of in a spiritual and personal growth context with these folks. But I realized after working in that context for about 10 years that really, the spiritual aspect wasn't enough, and it needed to be balanced out with psychologically informed skill set. So I went to Naropa University and got my master's degree in transpersonal counseling psychology. Transpersonal counseling came out of Stan Grof's work and his LSD research, and is a field of psychology that studies altered states of consciousness, the overlap of psychology and spirituality, but specifically the study of psychedelic medicines in therapy and religious practice. I was trained by MAPS as an MDMA-assisted psychotherapist. My wife and I were the first students to go through that program. And then I've done a lot of hands-on work as well. I developed a protocol to use cannabis as a psychedelic medicine and use these skill sets from the underground practices, the Naropa practices, particularly mindfulness-based psychotherapy practices are extremely important in this work. And then after school, I continued with learning about somatic psychotherapy practices. And so the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness started a program called Psychedelic Sitter School, which brings together these modalities into one kind of umbrella image that we call mindfulness-based psychedelic therapy. And so we train students through the use of cannabis at first to practice as a psychedelic guide, but now with the new laws of the Natural Medicine Health Act, we're bringing in psilocybin support training, ketamine-assisted psychedelic therapy, and we're also stepping into working with DMT and training with DMT now as a therapeutic tool, all under the personal use side of the law. The psychedelic therapy isn't just the session of providing the medicine in a contained space. It's held in a larger container of support. And when we have clinical concerns like PTSD or severe depression, severe anxiety and things, we put a lot of support around these sessions. So, and it's even in the new law, Natural Medicine Health Act requires at least one preparation and at least one integration session coupled with the medicine session. If someone were to call us or connect with our clinic, they would fill out an intake form and do a discovery call where we would explain our services and introduce ourselves and pair the potential client with a guide. With ketamine and cannabis sessions, we scheduled 2 medicine sessions pretty close together with a preparation and integration support session. With psilocybin, though, we require several integration sessions, and we also have some protocols where we don't combine the medicines in an individual session, but we do protocols where a person can do a week-long intensive. For instance, doing a cannabis, psychedelic cannabis, then a psilocybin journey, then another cannabis journey, or 2 cannabis sessions and 2 ketamine sessions in 1 week. So we have these week-long intensives that people are really benefiting from. So that's the general protocol. And then as far as ongoing support, some of our clients already have psychotherapists. They're flying from out of town, and so it's a short-term therapeutic protocol. We just make sure they're in good space before we send them off. And then others are ongoing clients that will do a series of psychotherapeutic or spiritual counseling sessions, and then another series of medicine work.
Awesome. So can you tell me more about what you've seen people get out of it?
The benefits are pretty extraordinary. Working with cannabis and ketamine or other medicines in a week-long intensive, we can see someone with severe PTSD symptoms, really struggling in their body, highly anxious, reset their nervous system in a way that appears to be substantially permanent. It's like a resolution of a trauma. So instead of addressing the symptomology, the surface level symptomology, like the anxiety or other struggles that someone has, the medicine itself allows them to drop deeper to the core struggles. What happened to elicit that difficulty in the first place. And once that's addressed, and we can speak to the neurology of how that happens. Once that's addressed, then it's complete. But the next step would be the integration of the experience. So sometimes people realize that their choices in life that they've made no longer support them. So there's significant transitions that occur. So we've seen people go from with severe trauma, unable to sleep, shaking in their bodies, suicidal, going from really severe, devastating places to feeling like a normal human being again, sometimes for the first time in their lives.
So can you talk more about how the decriminalization of magic mushrooms in Colorado has enabled your work, and sort of looking at the future of psychedelic use, and now that the NIH is officially funding research for the first time, the first, after the Oregon Psilocybin Act, the first healing centers are opening up again. Like, what do you see as the future of your practice in regards to these laws, as well as just psychedelic medicine in general?
Mm-hmm. Well, the Natural Medicine Health Act was a game changer. We had started to work with cannabis as a psychedelic, and then we brought ketamine in a few years ago, but in preparation for these other medicines becoming legal and available for therapeutic use. I'm a huge fan of cannabis, but it's been a hard sell for folks because they just don't believe it is a psychedelic. What we found, though, bringing in psilocybin mushrooms into our work, now that it's legal under what we're calling supported use for personal use. It's legal for a person to use psilocybin mushrooms for personal use and pay for therapeutic support in these sessions. So we're in the space of pre-regulations in the licensing process. So we're working under the personal use model. We've been working with psilocybin mushrooms since March. We were training with it before then, so we jumped into working with it as soon as we could, and it's been a game changer. We've done maybe 40 psilocybin journeys so far, and we have several more dozen on the books. Everybody who wanted to do this work but couldn't because it wasn't legal yet are finding us and wanting to work with us because they want that therapeutic and clinical and organizational support over a private practitioner.
What do you see as the future of psychedelic medicine?
Colorado just legalized. Oregon had legalized. California is right on the edge of legalization. I think we're going to see multiple states popping into legalization pretty quickly. We're going to see a lot of new clinics opening up, a lot of new retreat centers opening up. And then if Oregon is an example, many more training programs are going to start. I think it's important to assess the people you work with and the training programs you work with to discern whether or not they actually have substantial experience with these medicines, because there's going to be companies that come online that really don't have a lot of experience with these programs, and they're going to treat them as just any other psychotherapy program or other business, and I don't think those are going to work so well. So we're going to see both a flourishing of medicine practices opening up, and then we're also going to see a lot of companies not make it. So there will be some sort of rush similar to what happened with cannabis.
A lot of people are going to be calling you, trying to get you dirty laundry. I know. Holy fucking shit.
I'd just like to give a plug for psychedelic therapy as an incredible tool for transformation and growth and deep personal healing. And myself, my family, So many people I know have benefited from this work. And when you find the right facilitator or guide, you really can heal something that felt impossible before. And bringing in psilocybin has been such an extraordinary experience. And one of the things we're learning after bringing in psilocybin is how important these other tools are that are also available to us. There's the journey itself, it's so beautiful and important, but the integration after the experience is in some ways the more important step for people to take. And that it's important to do the integration work and to provide good preparation work to get the most out of these medicines. So I just wanted to name that and advocate for that.
A huge thank you again to Daniel Mcqueen for welcoming me into the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness. Stick around, because in just a few weeks, we'll go back to the center to get an in-depth look at how the Mcqueens train new psychedelic facilitators. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. Don't get psyched out! Alrighty.